Dan Kilbridge here for SpartanTailgate.com press coverage. I'm at South Case Hall Dormitory where it all began for Michigan State. This is where they bunk for their preseason camp, and they now enter the 12th week of the season at Penn State. Whenever Michigan State plays Penn State under Dantonio, I always go back to that 2007 game. The Spartans were 6-5 entering that game, had a host of close losses throughout the season in Dantonio's first year, including a particularly devastating loss to Michigan at home 2 weeks prior. Michigan State trailed in that game 17-7 at the half and 31-21 in the fourth quarter. They were able to come back with a Brian Hoyer touchdown pass to Devin Thomas, followed by a J.U. Kalkrick touchdown run. Michigan State ultimately took the game 35-31. I think that was a turning point in the Mark Dantonio era. That is when I think most people really started to buy into what he was doing. The fact that the Spartans were able to show as much resolve as they did in that game and ultimately get the victory was a very positive sign for this team and what Mark Dantonio was trying to do. Flash forward a few years, the Spartans are traveling to Penn State with much higher implications, this one with a Big Ten title on the line. It's something they also had a chance to do in 2008 and weren't able to do. Happy Valley is a very tough place to play. Michigan State fell behind early, which is something you cannot do. They were underexperienced and they were just overmatched on that particular day. Dantonio now has the Spartans in the same situation in 2010, and I think it'll be a little easier this time around because, one, the Spartans have more experience. They have guys who have played in those types of games. And two, Joe Paterno, legendary Penn State coach, announced this week that he will be back for a 46th season. So even though Penn State will surely be motivated for this one, I'm not sure it'd be the same if everyone knew it was Paterno's last game. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Spartans need to get off to a good start. It's something they've had trouble doing throughout much of the Big Ten season, but a promising sign was last week against Purdue. Even though they fell behind in the first quarter, they scored a touchdown on their very first drive. Cousins led the team down the field, and I think that ultimately shows that they can provide that spark in the first quarter and get off to a good start. Now, it's going to be a little tougher on Cousins Saturday because he's hurt right now. He's pretty banged up. He's got a sprained left ankle and a sprained left shoulder, and it's something that's been bothering him for 4 to 5 weeks now, but the problem is they were re-aggravated against Purdue. He has scaled it back a little bit in practice this week, and we'll see how effective he can be. I know it really hurts for him to step into those throws and plant his left ankle, but it's something he'll need to do, and he talked about the fact that there's only one more game and then he can get some rest, and that's how those types of injuries need to heal. Now you look at the matchup he has with Penn State secondary, they're pretty good against the pass. They've got a safety, Nick Suke, who Cousins is very familiar with. Suke intercepted Cousins and returned it 35 yards during the Penn State game last year, which MSU lost. Now, they run basic schemes. They don't really try to surprise you. Paterno's been there so long, everyone knows what Penn State is going to do, and I think that maybe makes preparation a little bit easier. You still have to go out and make plays, but I think the prep is easier knowing what you have to do. When Cousins threw those 2 interceptions last year, I don't think he was surprised by anything saw it with Penn State's coverage. He just didn't make the throws. Now you look elsewhere on Penn State, offensively, they've got a new quarterback in Matt McGloin. He's played 7 games this season, and he's totaled over 1,000 yards passing and 11 touchdowns, including 4 against Northwestern. He's a pretty effective guy, and he's been replacing Rob Bolden, the freshman, who was out with a head injury. They've also got a running back you may have heard of, Evan Royster. He set the all-time leading Penn State rushing record this season. He's a very effective back. He's a senior. He's a big guy, so you know he's going to come to play, and Michigan State's linebackers and defensive linemen are really going to have to focus on shutting down that smash-mouth attack and getting to the quarterback. Prediction time, as I mentioned, it's a very tough place to play. I think it's going to be too much for the Spartans this time, but I do think it will be a lot more competitive than we saw in 2008. I think Michigan State loses a heartbreaker 24-21 to Penn State and moves to 10-2 on the season with a New Year's Day Bowl awaiting them. Now you look at what Michigan State has been able to do this season, and I think they are showing that they are capable of competing for the Big Ten title year in and year out. So while it gets a little tougher with Nebraska entering the conference next season and with the eventual championship game, I think Mark Dantonio has built a foundation that will allow the Spartans to compete for championships in many years to come. Dan Kilbridge here for SpartansTailgate.com press coverage.